الحمد لله رب العالمين صلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا ثم أما بعد. So I want to welcome all of you for being here with us on the very special panel that we have to discuss a very difficult situation, a very difficult really incident and a fact of life that we have been going through for some time, but never expected this to happen in such a dramatic way in such a beautiful place like New Zealand. So we're talking about the Christchurch attack, the massacre, Allah musta'an, the difficult time that the community is going through over there. So what we would like to share with you, inshallah, tabaraka wa ta'ala, from different perspectives, as a Muslim community living here in America, this is, even though geographically speaking, it's too far from where we are today, but in terms of ideology, in terms of circumstances, subhanAllah, it can happen anywhere. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect the community, Rabbil Alameen. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal to forgive those who lost their lives in that day. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have mercy on them and their souls. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give beautiful patience for their families, for their communities, for the people of New Zealand, Rabbil Alameen. Say Ameen Jama'ah. So in our panel, inshallah, we're going to discuss this from a political perspective, talking about it from a psychological perspective, security issue as well for us in the community, and also from a spiritual perspective, inshallah. So we have a wonderful team on this panel. Brother Muhammad Al-Biari, he is an analyst who served under the Republican and the Democratic leadership in the country as a former advisor for the Department of Homeland Security. He is not new to us in the community, alhamdulillah. Every time a situation like this happens, he's the best person to come and talk to us about this. We invited him when President Trump was elected and became the president to talk about the situation in the future. Since then until today, a lot of things happened, and I invited him to come and let us know what exactly happened, how this happened, and how should we understand this, and where we go from there. So inshallah ta'ala, we hear from Brother Muhammad Al-Biari.
Jazakallah khairan, Sheikh. Can everyone hear me fine? I feel like it might be a little loud. So.
They'll fix it as you speak. They'll fix it as you speak, inshallah.
Okay. All right. So it's a very broad topic. I'm going to try in 15 minutes to kind of cover a little bit about, and I'm going to try to walk away a little bit from the other mic because I feel the echo. But I'm going to try to actually go about 15 minutes and leave 5 minutes for Q&A because each one of you could decide where you want to kind of take the conversation. I was supposed to cover how did we get here, what is the threat, and also how to fix it. So that's kind of fairly broad. How did we get here? Well, it's several centuries of evolution of different identities, culture clash happening with immigrants and native-born across the Western world. This is not a new phenomena. I think a lot of you have read by now a lot of analysis online of how this is the white nationalist movement is broad and in just about every Western country is growing. There's several factors for that. I will get back to it in just a second. But there's also, I'll take you back to the conversation we had in this masjid 2 years ago and when Trump was elected, and then another conversation during the campaign itself a year earlier, where I was sharing with you the research that is very clear out there is who's gravitating to this kind of xenophobic nationalist current. Tends to be white guys that are not very well educated and by and large live in rural environments that are not benefiting from the global economy. Our community, mashallah, alhamdulillah, here in Texas has been living very well. Employment is not an issue. Education is not an issue. We're enjoying the benefits of globalization. If you live in the major metropolitan areas in Texas, you really don't have a hard time finding a job or a career path if you follow the normal steps that everybody else has followed. But in a lot of rural counties in Texas and elsewhere, you find that you end up with the traditional manufacturing base of the country, has crumbled. It's much cheaper to manufacture elsewhere, or manufacture more efficiently, or if there's high-tech manufacturing, you can't get that job because you don't have a degree. There's resentment. The issues of identity are complicated, but I'm going to give you a very simple framing that we can use during the discussion. Most people are either going to define themselves either by their religious identity as number one, or their ethnic identity / racial, or their cultural identity. Now, there is overlap between all three. Nothing is 100%. Nobody is only a Muslim. They also have a nationalist identity or a ethnic or cultural identity. But when your identity, like the shooter in New Zealand, when he wrote the manifesto, raise your hand if you read it. Okay, that's not bad. So when you read that manifesto, you could clearly see that he saw the world through a racial lens. You can't be Western, you can't be Australian, New Zealander, an American, a real American, unless you belong to this racial identity that is rooted and descended from Europe. If you come from somewhere else, you're kind of a guest, even if you're multiple generations deep. He says in his manifesto that he doesn't have a problem with Muslims if they just go where they came from, basically, Muslim majority countries. He doesn't have a problem with Jews if they go back to their own country, which he called Israel. This kind of a person belongs in an ideological pot that you've heard the media talk about as white nationalist or white supremacist. They're really interchangeable terms. The white nationalist term is a little bit more neutral. The white supremacist term is basically saying the effect. You know, when you have a cause and effect, the effect of white supremacism is obviously discrimination against everybody who doesn't fit in that pot. Many of the people that I see in this audience are of Arab descent. You're an example of a people here in America that have been classified as white since the 1920s, when there was an immigration crackdown in this country. For about 40 years, you had a really hard time immigrating to America unless your country of origin was considered white. And Arab countries got exempted into that pot. But you're not really, in the eyes of white nationalists, seen as white, because you're not descended from Europe. These people are all over the place. When I first started learning about them here in Dallas, there was approximately 4,000 of them about 15 years ago that were identified by anti-hate groups. So they're all around us. Most of them have been involved in things like drugs, smuggling, selling, whatever. Their lives are dysfunctional, and politically, their organizations have been bankrupted because after the civil rights era, a lot of attorneys would sue them and end up bankrupting their nonprofits, taking their properties, so they can't really organize collectively. Because they can't also, when they come to march in a city, anywhere in America today, there's an extremely broad coalition in America that opposes them. So they're confronted. So they can't culturally win over the American population. And most of the West is like this. This is why you can see now in New Zealand the response from the native New Zealanders includes things like having the Azan broadcast across the country in place of a traditional moment of silence that you would see in a traditional Western country. You also see the wearing the hijab from a lot of the native New Zealanders in solidarity with the Muslim community. A lot of little things are happening that are culturally that show you that the broader population is rejecting this kind of identity of white nationalism. They're basically saying, no, there isn't an us versus them, an in-group and an out-group. where in the out group you put all the immigrants. In the in group you have the ones who are descended from Europe originally. Now, everything I explained to you is basically the framework of the ideology. People don't change their identities very easily. It rarely happens. The largest group in the world that defines itself through a religious identity are Muslims. Most Christians would define themselves ethnically or nationally first before they define themselves as Christian across the globe. So we are the largest quote-unquote religious identity group in the globe. But when it comes to people of European descent who, frankly, are inheritors of the benefits of the European colonialism era that basically blanketed the globe and gave us what today we call globalization, breaking down the barriers of nations, increasing trade and interdependence between nations. All that came out of that period over the past 3-4 centuries. Those people tend to define themselves through their lineage, which goes back again to Europe, more than anything else. They're not the only ones. You can find in the Muslim majority world a lot of people who also define themselves ethnically first, or what in America we would say racially, but it's the same thing, or similar. Culture is where you can kind of bridge this divide, where you step forward and say, in the American culture, in the New Zealand culture, what does it mean to be a New Zealander? What does it mean to be an American? In America, some people who oppose this kind of hate and discrimination define what it means to be an American in a very inclusive manner. So an American is not somebody from a particular lineage or skin color, race, or anything else. Anybody can be an American. You hear phrases like, we're all immigrants. It just depends on when you got here. That is a cultural approach to try to create an inclusive super identity that would allow people who define themselves in different ways to fit under that big umbrella of what does it mean to be an American. You also have, in this particular administration, in the last few years, we've seen our political system, people who step up, especially this current president, and use language that sounds to the majority of us like he's actually exclusive. It's not the big inclusive America is for everyone, but America is for people who have citizenships. Anybody who doesn't have a citizenship, you're an invader. You came here maybe in a previous Republican or Democratic administration, but you are here and we don't want you. Especially if you are receiving public assistance. And you see some of the immigration enforcement policies by this administration going after people who are very vulnerable, either as immigrants or as refugees or asylum seekers or people who are green card holders or visa holders but use public assistance. That's the philosophy of the current president. And the administration is following in that direction. But up until this current president, traditionally when you had Democrats or Republicans, they tried to define through culturally again what it means to be an American in an inclusive manner. We as a minority, Muslims, Jews, Mormons, whatever, it doesn't matter, will benefit most and will face the least amount of discrimination when the inclusive definition of what it means to be an American is ascendant in society. So that's why we should always promote this kind of cultural and political discourse. And we should always confront and challenge the exclusivity. Now, in my last couple of minutes, I'm going to share with you. Now, this ideology that is out there that's very exclusive is not the only one. There's plenty of ideologies. We all know, as Muslims, ISIS had an ideology. Al-Qaeda had an ideology that were exclusive. And a lot of Muslims died because they didn't fit in the mold, local villagers in wherever country, because ISIS didn't accept them as proper Muslims. This kind of ideology is like the paint on a painting. It has to go on a canvas. That canvas is the personal life of the person who's going to carry out that attack. If you go and look at the kid, the homegrown violent extremist, whether it's a Muslim kid here in America or you go look at this guy in New Zealand, you find that his personal life is dysfunctional. It's not working. He's not a success in his real life. The dysfunction in his personal life is explained in his mind by macro big picture issues. That is the ideology he adopts. Why are you not a successful Australian in your own country and needed to go to New Zealand? Well, if there was less immigrants in Australia or New Zealand, I would have a job. Similarly, here in the Irving area, some of you probably saw the documentary a few years ago of the guys who went and protested in front of the ICI with the guns. Their leader, David Wells, I believe, or something, when you watch him talking in the documentary with the reporter in the car with him as he's driving in the neighborhood next to ICI, and he sees all these big, expensive homes that Muslims are living in, you can clearly see in his face and in his voice the resentment. Why are these people who just recently arrived to America rich and successful, and why am I struggling and frankly a loser in my personal life? What they have should belong to me. It's part of my birthright as a white male American, because I am the real American. You see how you have to have the canvas that the paint or the ideology is going to be spread on. What we can do as a minority is not obviously fix...
5 minutes.
Okay. It is very difficult as a minority group to fix this problem in a majority culture. Why, especially for a new immigrant community which is struggling itself to get its own new members who are recent arrivals to get educated, get mainstreamed, get jobs, and start establishing themselves in America. I told you guys in a previous discussion a couple of years ago, we are a community with a lot of high-tech IT mental power and connections. We live in the digital age. But the problem that we have as a community is we also can't reach out in the rural areas. Maybe 20 counties, maybe 10%, less than 10% of Texas are major city counties where you have the largest Muslim populations. But these angry guys are all in these rural counties. We don't communicate with them. They don't understand that their white nationalist identity can be evolved, so to speak. We're not their problem. Their problem is dislocation economically, socially, politically, and a number of other issues. But you have to engage them and help them. And we haven't done that. It's also not just us, but a lot of other minorities in America. But that's the challenge. Maybe 50 years ago, this country said that we should establish a national program for African Americans to go to college. And that program has received over $23 billion of donations, as well as government grant money, as well as taxpayer money. And the NAACP runs the program. We don't do that for white guys. We also don't, in our political system, allow people to organize under their white identity. This is a big discussion that we had at a think tank in DC a few years ago I was part of. I was of the opinion, because I actually wrote an article about these guys, I call them Bubbas, in 2008, that you can go back and check out on muslimmatters.org. I felt bad for them. I can see that our community will get over its problems, because previous generations of Muslims have also gotten over their problems. And there isn't really an existential threat to the Muslim community in America. So eventually we'll all get there. It's just a matter of time. For these guys, they're left behind. I saw them in the Republican Party. I saw them disgruntled. Anybody who's educated in the Republican Party, even white guys, didn't pay them any attention. Because if you're an educated suburban Republican like I was, or am, you're going to find that they're going to support corporations, globalization, free trade, and they're not going to really care all that much about what's happening in the rural counties. Trump is really the first guy who's come over and said to them, I will be your voice. And that's why you're feeling their political backlash. So I'm going to stop here. Sure.
So let's take a few questions, inshallah ta'ala, on the perspective that Brother Muhammad Abyari presented over here, inshallah ta'ala. And also watching the live stream, if anyone from our online audience is having any question, feel free to write in the comment section, inshallah ta'ala, and we'll read it out loud for you, binillah azza wa jal. Any question on this, Jama'ah? Yes.
So it's a very good question. The question, for those who didn't hear it, is how can I, as a white non-Muslim male, help this community, meaning the Muslim community, move things forward positively? So there's several things. During this time, most Muslims don't understand what's happening, and there's naturally, as civilians, doesn't matter what your identity is, when you see an attack somewhere, you automatically assume it could happen. If it can happen anywhere, then you start worrying that it could happen everywhere. This is the natural way that your mind goes. So as a person who's a non-Muslim but a fellow American and a white male, when you come and you engage at the local level, the mosque or the local community of Muslims, and there's a lot of you doing that nationwide or across the West, all of those local Muslim communities find psychological comfort all of a sudden. They automatically figure out, okay, that guy that did it is by himself, even though he might have written a long manifesto saying that, you know, there's going to be a wave of people, white males, coming behind him doing this massacring stuff everywhere. And today he's a terrorist, but in 27 years, he said in his manifesto he's going to be released like Nelson Mandela, a hero. Because he assumes there's going to be this wave of white males coming behind him. But when white males show up at your local masjid, and it happens in 1,000 places across the country, the community automatically understands, no, that fear, the worst case scenario that we read about, is not real. This guy didn't even understand how most white males work. It's like when bin Laden stood up after 9/11 and said, we killed 3,000 Americans, and now we are the tip of the spear, and the whole Muslim Ummah is going to join behind us and kill all. We as Muslims knew that was nonsense. But there were a lot of Americans, a lot of white male Americans that were so scared, oh my God, there's millions of Muslims in America, so they could all just get up one day and kill us all. That irrational fear is normal. So thank you for being here, and thank you for physically, bridge building. Now, I will also give you the same challenge that we have as minorities, reaching out to that rural, underserved, average white guy there. You can also be an ambassador between both worlds. Frankly, most of the Muslim community in Texas doesn't know the names of those 90% of counties that we're not really in. But you can obviously educate the community on that.
I just want to thank you very much for being here. Just being here is actually a big help for the community. So thank you very much for being with us and just come and listen to our understanding of the circumstances over here. So once again, we appreciate your presence with us over here. I have a question coming from online audience, actually. They say, I think that there's maybe confusion over here. It says, do you say that white supremacy is not a real threat? Is that what it is?
I didn't say that white supremacy is not a real threat. That was actually a quote from the president.
Okay, so that, okay.
But what,
okay. So that was a quote from the president, not your personal statement.
No.
Okay, all right. Any other question we have here? Yes. Like, let me rephrase the question. So basically, like said, you said that a lot of the people who are disgruntled, who might be potentially, maybe a threat in the future in the same way that happens there in New Zealand, they're coming from a specific, let's say, demographics, also socioeconomic status and so forth. So how can we reach out to these people? How can we help them to get out of this situation?
So one of the ways that we can reach out, I obviously would rephrase it as, I'm not saying go reach out to racist people. But what I said is underserved, undereducated, rural, especially white males that don't have college degrees. Mm-hmm. That population is the target population that the folks who try to promote this ideology are trying to recruit from. So if we engage with, we as a country, engage and empower this segment to feel mainstream, then they will not be vulnerable to recruitment. It's the same thing that happened with the Muslim homegrown extremists. If there's somebody living on the outskirts of the community, not mainstream in the masjid, and all of a sudden is spending their whole time online watching jihadi videos, go talk to them, get an imam to sit with them, and mainstream them. Get their life straightened out, get them doing something constructive, and then it'll make it harder for the ISIS types to obviously encourage him to go throw his life away by trying to harm other innocent people. No. Same thing with this demographic group that I'm talking about. One of the ways that we can help is obviously to do da'wah missions to these counties. Not to necessarily convert them, but to also introduce our community. Have conversations. You're going to find that in most of those counties, the #1 employer is school districts, public school districts. If we stand up for public schools and the state's funding of public schools, then their local economies don't fall any further. When we meet with our chambers of commerces in Irving and elsewhere here in the Metroplex and encourage them to put some jobs out in West Texas and in rural areas, that's good for us long term. Not everything has to be located here in the suburbs. So those are simple examples, and I don't want to take more time.
Jazakallah khair. I'm sure we're going to have, inshallah, more questions for you towards the end, binillah azza wa jal. So second, inshallah, I want to give the microphone to Brother Uthman Mughni, who is our resident family therapist and counselor, to talk to us, inshallah, about the psychological impact of these kind of events that happens around us, and how can we cope with the stress and the anxiety that might arise because of that, and how can we answer the questions of our own children? If our kids asking these questions, how can we really explain the situation for them? How can we rationalize the irrational?
Bismillah wa salatu wa salam. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wa hlul 'uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalamu alaikum.
So just to chime in really quickly on some of the questions which were asked before I get started on what I want to say. From a psychological perspective, we know that hate is not something innate. We're not born with it, right? To hate somebody else, this is learned behavior. And as a community, Muslim, non-Muslim, if we're able to put a human face on the community, right? So then it's not just them versus us. It's not just the immigrants, right? But it's, oh, this is my pediatrician. This is my teacher. This is my neighbor, which cooked me some awesome biryani yesterday, right? When you put a human face on that, it's more difficult to hate, you know? So thank you for being here. Thank you for seeing that we all have human faces, and, you know, we struggle just like you. We have wacky senses of humor, everything. When you put a human face on it, it's very difficult to hate, right? It's just a small point to be made. Okay, so I want to start off by reading the official statement by the president of the American Psychological Association, Rosie Phillips Davis. And she just came out with a statement. She said that the horrific shootings at 2 mosques in New Zealand point up yet again the need for more scientific research into the causes of extremist violence, as well as the role of social media in the spread of dangerous, hate-filled rhetoric. Like the rest of the world, the American Psychological Association mourns this needless loss of life and is appalled by this unspeakable act of bias-fueled prejudice. We must find evidence-based solutions to stop the gun violence that is becoming a global public health crisis. Psychology and psychologists stand ready once again to offer those in distress the comfort, guidance, and counseling they need to maintain their resilience in the midst of such shock and grief. I always try to look for the moments of hope in horrible situations like this, and seeing the community and the community response and the fact that the masjid is flooded today, alhamdulillah, with people, gives me that hope, because the perpetrator, this poor excuse for a human being, wanted us to be scared. And yet here we are tonight, filling the masjid. Our sisters with their hijab, showing that we're not scared, and rather this will only increase us in faith. You know, so similar to, you know, the Ku Klux Klan and their tactics of trying to instill fear, the more we show that, no, this is only going to make us yearn to go to the masjid more. This is only going to make us stronger as a community. This is only going to make us, you know, apply the verse, Inna hadihi ummatukum ummatan wahida, that verily this nation of yours is one nation, and that even though I'm assuming a lot of us, or most of us, have not been to New Zealand, it's beautiful. I plan a hiking trip there one day, inshallah. We still mourn the loss of those families, just as if they were our own families. So we are one nation. But as Allah Azza wa Jal says in another verse, right, that when the threat of violence, you know, الَّذِينَ قَالَ لَهُمُ النَّاسُ إِنَّ النَّاسَ قَدْ جَمَعُوا لَكُمْ فَاخْشَوْهُمْ, that when it was said that people have gathered to destroy you, so you should fear them, فَزَادَهُمْ إِيمَانًا, that rather their iman increased, our faith increases. We stand firm knowing that we put our trust in God, we put our faith in God. And one of the points that I made about having a healthy narrative, or trying to have a healthy narrative of this, is that we believe in our faith that these people died as martyrs. They died shaheed. They died on the month of Rajab. They died on the blessed day of Ramadan. They died in the house of Allah. So our reality is that we're saddened. But from aqidah, from a faith perspective, what is their reality right now? We believe that their reality is paradise. And I think that that, above everything, gave me comfort. Knowing that while we are saddened and in shock and in fear, our brothers and sisters and the children which lost their lives, youngest being, what, 3 years old? Right? I have a 5-year-old. I was horrified to see that. They're in paradise. They're in paradise. So let's talk about how we talk to our children about this, right? And first, before that, we have to have a healthy narrative ourselves in order to talk to our children, right? One of the things, just go on a quick tangent, that came to mind was I work a lot with something known as generalized anxiety disorder, GAD, which is where you're constantly anxious about numerous things, right? If I go to a shopping mall, what happens if there's a shooter which comes in? If I'm at the movie theater, what happens if something bad happens? And so I had a few clients which just overall were scared to go to public places and even the masjid. And what hurt me was, in traditional cognitive behavioral therapy, you teach them, listen, what are the chances of that happening? Don't worry, we're in America. There's security. You're in the house of God. It's okay. And I was just looking at this event and saying, as more of these happen, do I stop telling that this is an irrational fear and start telling this is a rational fear? And that really broke my heart to think that maybe this is this the reality? So what do I tell these patients of mine? That that anxiety that you had actually is not anxiety, it's a reality. So just one of the things to think about, but we strive to have a healthy narrative. So let me try and just go over a few points as to how to talk to our children about this, because this is one of the questions that I got quite a bit. And by the way, as far as the community response, I'm not sure if you noticed, there's multiple events like this happening tonight. Dr. Rani Awad, she's a very nice psychiatrist out in Stanford. At this time, right now, out in Cali, they're holding this exact same event, mashallah. And there's many more like this. So the first thing, when it comes to talking to children, plan out what you're going to say, right? Pick out a specific time, plan out what you're going to say. Don't just while you're watching TV, just say, hey, by the way, this happened, right? Plan out what you're going to say, practice it, talk to your spouse about it, talk to other adults which are going to be there, and also keep note of the age of the child, right? So these are just a few recommendations, right? So first of all, I was just asked this question today in class. For very young children, let's say like 6 and younger, what do you explain to them, right? So the recommendation is just keep it to one sentence. Number one, you don't have to break the news to them. Right now, my 5-year-old's world is about like Peppa Pig and Legos, and I want to keep it that way. Yes, I don't want to hide the reality of, these type of events, but he's 5. Allah Azza wa Jal gave him that innocence. Let him have that innocence for a little bit longer. But if your child does happen to say, hey, I heard this in school, or my bigger brother or bigger sister were talking about this, right? Limit it to one sentence, something very basic. Today a lot of people were hurt. A lot of mommies and daddies lost their lives. A lot of, brothers and sisters. But it's okay because they're with God now. And we can just pray for them and pray for their families. Just leave it one sentence, okay? As far as elementary school is where their mindset is still about very right or wrong. It's a very binary view of the world. Either you're a good boy or a bad boy. It's not, morality is not challenged that much at this age. So shield them from the gore, shield them from, the ugliness of what happened, and try and point out for them, yes, this did happen, but look at the community response. Look at how the Prime Minister responded, right? Look at, our beautiful neighbors which came, to protect us even though they don't share the same faith as us, but they share that same humanity, right? Look at all around the world, all these people making prayers, and how much prayers are sent down to the families of those which lost their lives. So for the elementary school kids, right, we want to share the positive, which came, like the good things which came out of this event, right? For preteens and middle school age children, listen to their feelings. First, find out what do they know, right? So before dumping everything on them, ask them, so like, what did you hear? Or what are they talking about in school? What do you know about the event? Let them share their feelings, right? Our job as parents, as adults, is to allow them to share their feelings, but then at the same time, help them navigate through those feelings. If it's anger, it's okay to be angry. It's okay to be hurt. It's okay to be scared. But what do I do with those emotions, right? With these type of things, sometimes there's two very, very extreme responses. One is that we completely hide the reality of the world from our children. Everything is rosy and so on. And then they'll see something on social media and be like, wait a minute, Mom and Dad, it's not as rosy as you said. And the other is where you just say, hey, by the way, like, here's a video of what happened. Please, God, do not share that video, if y'all know what I'm talking about, right? That only further tries to, traumatizes, and kind of like the objective that idiot wanted, we don't want to give him that benefit. So another extreme where we just share everything, right? So let's try to be balanced and kind of be in the middle. For teenagers and college students, along with talking about solutions, now this is an age where we can actually start to engage in, public policy, different thoughts. What are your thoughts about? So at this age, children start to question laws and morality and why are things the way that they are. So you can engage your children. Why did this happen? Your children might ask, well, why do they hate us, right? So have an answer prepared for that as to why things happen the way that they did, along with their feelings, right? It's okay to be angry, but then let them redirect their anger in a healthy manner, right? So find out what your children know first, right? Plan what you're going to say. Find out what your children know first. The third thing is to share your feelings, making sure that you have a healthy narrative first. You know what? I'm sad that this happened. I am. I'm hurt. And, I mean, with the advent of social media, I found out about this literally within an hour of it happening. And one of my friends, with good intention, the first thing he sent me was that video. And I was like, what is this, you know? So you can share with your children, hey, it's okay to get angry. It's okay to get sad. It's okay to get upset. But, you know, our religion teaches us that these people died and are in a good place. And our religion teaches us to be the better people, right? One of the students asked me in class today that, like, you know, her children were saying that, well, it makes me angry that I want to do something. Well, no, we as Muslims, even in the time of war, we are not allowed to hurt a messenger. We're not allowed to hurt any, delegates. We're not allowed to hurt any places of worship. When Salahuddin Ayyubi, rahimahullah, when he took back the lands of Palestine, he didn't break any crosses. He didn't, desecrate any churches. So we want to show our children that our morality is above that. We don't want to stoop down to the level of this scum. So it's okay to be angry, but how do we direct that anger? Tell the truth. Step 4. And also, I'm sorry. As you share your feelings, don't force them to have certain feelings. If they're not angry, it's okay. If they're not immediately sad, it's okay. You all know the stages of grief? 5 stages of grief? Keebler, whatever it's called. What are the 5 stages? Somebody yell them out for me. Denial. Anger. Before bargaining is? Depression. Depression, then? Bargaining. And then acceptance, right? So we don't know what stage of grief they're at. Let them go through that. Very good, Michelle. But don't force it on them. But at the same time, we want to finally direct them to this idea of acceptance that we do accept, again, our reality and their reality are different. Our reality is we're sad. Their reality is that they're in paradise. Tell them the truth. Number 4, tell them the truth, but no need to give all the gory details. Hey, this is what happened. There were 2 people which entered in. There were 2 masjids which were shot up, and this is what happened. And then the most important step is to offer reassurance, right? Okay, yeah, I'm almost done here. So have a safety plan, right? And it could be something as simple as reading your daily morning adhkar, right? Knowing all of the wonderful security guards here at Valley Ranch, right? Knowing that if you are distressed, you always have somebody to talk to, right? So offering them that safety plan. When I talked about dealing with emotions, negative emotions, and obviously this is an event which floods us with emotions, I said that the best approach as a parent is to do what's known as emotional coaching, right? An emotionally coaching parent does 2 things. 1, he or she allows the child to feel what they're feeling. It's okay to feel sad. It's okay to feel depressed. But 2, they teach self-soothing, right? My child falls off a bike. He's crying. Hey, it's okay to cry, but this is how you put a Band-Aid on, right? Let's teach our children how to put a Band-Aid over this wound that we're feeling as a community, right? And it could be through dua. It could be through community engagement. It could be through discussions. It could be through forums like this. But there's always something that you can do. And even just, it's very now normal for us sometimes to say, without thinking about it, that all we can do is dua. All we can do is dua. That statement, I think, it really downgrades the power of dua, the power of prayer. All we can do is dua. Historically, dua has changed the face of nations, has changed the course of human history. The ayat in Surah Al-Baqarah that you were just reading, right? The dua of Ibrahim changed the course of humanity. Imam Ahmad, rahimahullah, his dua in prison changed the course of the nation, right? So, supplication. Supplication, thank you. So allow them that, so what we call internal locus of control, this idea that if I feel helpless, I can turn to God who will be able to alleviate my pain. And it's not just supplication. supplication is very powerful. Allow your children and yourselves to feel empowered, knowing that supplication is reaching to the one who can alleviate our pain like that. Yeah. So again, just to quickly go over the 5 points. Plan what you're going to say and practice it before you say it to your children. Number 2, find out what they know first. Number 3, share your feelings without forcing them to have certain feelings, rather navigate through their current emotional state. Number 4, tell the truth, but no need to give all the gory details. And number 5 is to offer that reassurance, including a safety plan, including things that they can do, and giving them the message that no matter how you feel, we're always available to talk, inshallah. And so that's what I have.
Jazakallah khair. Thank you very much, Barakallah Feek. Now, if you have any questions about these points that he mentioned to us, inshallah ta'ala, please feel free to do so. Also, our online audience, you feel free to leave your... Scared me, man.
That was loud, sorry.
I need counseling now. Okay. So if you have any question, you can post that online as well, inshallah ta'ala. So do you have any question here, Jama'ah? MashaAllah, very quiet. Are you guys scared to ask these questions? Yeah? Okay. Oh, we have one over there. Go ahead, Bismillah. So basically, to rephrase the question is again, the grief that we're going through. Can we solve this by helping the aggressor, by relieving their grief in the first place? Did I ask the question correctly? Okay.
By relieving their grief.
Like before we go with our, let's say we're in pain. Instead of working on ourselves, can we work on the aggressor's, pain so we can help them feel better, so we can help feel better ourselves? We're not talking about the attackers, right? We're talking about people who are out there. Nah. Uh-huh. Okay.
Okay, I think we both got your question now. I would replace the word aggressor. The aggressor is the guy who actually attacked us.
Mm-hmm.
The people who are suspicious or hate us but don't know us, those aren't aggressors. They haven't done anything to us yet. It's very important to remember not to put that label on them, because frankly, if you go back closer to the days of 9/11, when a lot of white Americans frankly feared us, they were putting that label on all of us, that all Muslims are a threat to them, not just the bad ones that are killing. The killers are the aggressors.
Can you find comfort by helping others? Thank you. Yeah, I mean, obviously, first we have to have a healthy narrative ourselves, right? Engage in self-care yourself. Engage in having a healthy narrative of what happened yourself, and then go out and reach out to others. And that way, you have that empowerment that I'm doing something about it. Yes, this is the decree of God that something like this, horrendous like this, happened. But as Umar radhiyallahu anhu used to say, that we fight one qadr with another qadr. We fight one decree with another decree. What that means is that if God decreed that I'm sick, which I am, so I coughed, sorry, then God also decreed that I can go buy a bunch of medicine and yep, right. So God decreed that this happened, but also decreed that we can reach out to communities, that we can show the true face of the Muslim community, right?
Jazakallah khair. So we move right now, inshallah ta'ala. We're going to have extra time, probably maybe at the end, for any questions. We're going to move to our security team here at the masjid. MashaAllah, we have Brother Nasser, who's the head of the security team, and also Brother Fuad with him. They're going to give us a briefing, inshallah ta'ala, on how to make sure to keep the community secure and how to manage, inshallah ta'ala, ourselves here to protect ourselves within Allah Azza wa Jalla.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. As Muhammad said, we've had a few of these panels over the last few years, and they always come at difficult crossroads for our community. This one is this tragedy has been especially difficult for, I think, everyone to process. For us, as a security team, it's gotten us thinking in 1,000 different threads, trying to figure out what can we do that we're not doing. The reality is, unfortunately, we all grew up knowing that places of worship were safe spaces. They're places of sanctity. Unfortunately, we live in a time now where that's no longer the case. We live in a time where our brothers in the Abrahamic faiths, brothers and sisters in Abrahamic faiths, where their churches have been attacked in similar fashions, where their synagogues have been attacked in similar fashions, and now we have a second instance in the West where a masjid has been attacked. Many of you may recall in January 2017, there was a terrorist attack at a masjid in Quebec. Killed, I think, 7 or 8 worshipers who were praying Isha prayer. Shortly after that, this is just to give a little bit of background as to what we're doing here, so you have a better understanding of how our security team came about, what the goal is, and then what the future holds. Shortly after that, Nasser, who has over 10 years of experience in security, in private security, Nasser and Ijaz Bakshi had come to me. I was still on the board at the time, and proposed a unique idea that I hadn't seen at a masjid in the U.S., which was to have a fully licensed and fully insured security team that was made up of volunteers from within the community. A team that was built, made up of community members who would be trained and licensed by the state to serve their masjid and protect their masjid. And the reason this proposal was brought forth was, one, it was an opportunity to provide daily security at our center, because we realized that we're entering a time where our places of worship are no longer sacred, are no longer safe. But secondly, it gives an opportunity for community members to be trained by law enforcement professionals, so that way, whether they're in uniform or not, they know how to handle situations. Those of you who come to VRIC daily will see at least 1 or 2 security officers outside. Each officer on the team, and Nasser will kind of go over the training that each member has gone through. But each officer on the team has gone through extensive training. As you also see, we have security officers who are commissioned, which is basically a term for saying they're armed. We've all heard in political discussions the term soft target and hard target. Unfortunately, what our aim is to make our places of worship hard targets, where if there is an aggressor, there is hopefully an adequate response to that aggression. And we saw a similar response at one of the masjids that was attacked in New Zealand. Right, there was a very, very brave volunteer, a hero, who took on the attacker and saved, I don't know how many dozens of lives based on his selfless act of heroism. So the team we have, it consists of 16 individuals who all volunteer their time. The goal for the security team here at VRIC is that every member of the team will be, and hopefully before Ramadan, will be licensed to be armed. And that, again, is a goal that we have so that we can ensure the safety of everyone here. The other thing that we have, the other advantage, alhamdulillah, that we have at VRIC, and I think every masjid in DFW has been able to establish this, which is a stellar relationship with our local law enforcement. Our relationship with the Irving Police Department is excellent, and it's been that way for many, many years. That foundation was set a long time ago, and it's a relationship where you know, the board has direct access to the chief of police, to the assistant chiefs of police. So when an incident like this does happen, they ensure that there's extra security. After the attack in Quebec, you know, we spoke to the police chief and we had extra patrols. We had a police officer on site for 2 days. After the terrorist attack in Orlando, similar response, and again, similar response this time. If you noticed last Friday, there was a significant increase in police presence. You also saw a significant increase in security presence. So that relationship is very strong, and they are providing all the services that we need. Last night, I had an opportunity to speak with one of the assistant chiefs, and again, he extended any and all support that the community needs. So before we move on to actual safety procedures here at this location and the next location that we'll be moving into very soon, inshallah, I'd like to just pass it on to Nasser so we can talk a little bit about some of the training that our officers go through.
Assalamu alaikum. Just a quick introduction of myself. My name is Nasser. I'm the owner of Pioneer Investigation Services. I've been in this field for the last 10 years. I'm also CHL, Concealed Handgun License Instructor, also NRA Pistol Instructor. Since we are limited on the time, I'm going to go right into the training that our security officer received. So non-commissioned is pretty much level 2, so they don't carry any firearm. So these are the training they go through. They're mandatory, so they go through ethic, report writing, type of offenses, radio procedures internally that we have, conflict resolution, Texas Penal Code, what they can do and cannot do, emergency responses, perception of the security officer, what community think of that security officer is, also prevention and deterrence. So these are the mandatory training that level 2 go through. And our commissioned security officers, in addition to level 2, they go to handcuff training, baton, pepper spray, also use of force, deadly weapon, shoot, no shoot, how to go that route, and also firearm. So we are licensed to carry shotgun and handgun. Right now, we also in process to give advanced training to our all level 3 security officers. It's going to be in-depth training of handgun and also self-defense. So that's in progress. Also, in the state of Texas, they require level 3 to have 85% accuracy on the shooting range. But here at the masjid, we require them to have at least 95% accuracy. So we know when they are in a situation where they have to, tackle the target, it's going to be accurate, right? So, and they also we're going to have additional training shotgun as well. So, in addition to that, we also meet on monthly basis. We talk about what the roadblocks are, where we at, what needs to be improved. That's in addition to the training we meet on a daily basis. Example I'll give you right now, at the new masjid right now, we're all meeting this Sunday to talk about our active shooter training and also to go over the plan. Yep.
Okay, so as Nasser said, on this weekend actually, the team is going to the new masjid site. We'll be planning out security procedures, evacuation plans, and then also developing the active shooter response for that location. But what's our response here? Aside from the security officers, what happened in New Zealand was the worst case scenario that goes through every Muslim's mind. You're sitting in the masjid on Friday, and somebody walks in. It's essentially coming into a room with sitting ducks. So what is our response? On Fridays, obviously, we have IPD here as well. So there are two barriers, two levels that any aggressor would have to get through to get into the masjid. That's getting through the Irving Police Department and then getting through the security team that we have. If a shooter does get in the masjid, on average, and Brother Muhammad can probably add a lot to these statistics and pieces, an active shooter event lasts 6 to 9 minutes. It's not very long. I think the New Zealand shooter was in the first masjid for 6.5 minutes, and then he went over. So these events move very, very quickly, and it's very important that you're mentally prepared for something like this, and you mentally prepare your families as well. At the end of the day, we don't want to be scared. Our safety and our trust is in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. However, we also we have a responsibility to be prepared and prepare our families as well. So there are, and this is from the Department of Homeland Security, so this is on their website. What do you do in the case of an active shooter situation? Again, your first instinct should be to run. Now, when you're inside of a masjid, and our facility here, is constructed a little differently, it's difficult to just run. So it's important that you know where the exits are in the masjid. It's important to know where you can safely leave the building, and it's important for you to discuss those logistical items with your families as well. So in this masjid, obviously we have a main door that comes into the prayer hall. However, we have exits on both sides of the building. So behind me, there are 2 rooms that both have exit doors. On this side of the building, there's one door or one door that's a designated exit door. You need to keep in mind where those are and what the easiest and fastest way is to get there. If you're not able to exit, you need to find a place to hide. Now, in a masjid, again, when you're in a prayer hall, there aren't that many places to hide. Coping with that situation, a lot of safety, and every training that we've gone through, a lot of safety is being aware of your surroundings, being aware of who's around. And then, again, exits and whatnot. Last resort is fight. And again, we have a security team in place to hopefully, and we pray again that no other place of worship is put in this type of situation, is put in this type of position. But again, we have a security team in place. We have Irving Police Department in place to be able to provide this type of response. But in any event, if you have no other option, then in a fight and flight situation, if you cannot fly, if you cannot exit, then that fight instinct does come in. Inshallah, one of the goals that we have as a team, and we're hoping we can do this before Ramadan, is conducting a community-wide safety seminar for the entire community, so they know not only what to do in this building, but what to do in the next building as well. And we'll work closely with law enforcement to be able to do that. But you can, again, rest assured, hopefully, that the masjid is doing everything that they can to ensure the safety of everyone that enters.
Jazakumullah khair, Brother Nasser, Brother Fuad, for this briefing on safety and security for the masjid. I want to open right now the floor for any questions, inshallah, for a few minutes before we go to the last part of the discussion, inshallah. Any question from you guys on the security issue? Yes. I just got a text message about the same question, actually.
So, inshallah, we are thinking about pursuing that.
Just to let the people know what the question is. So the question is about, alhamdulillah, we have a wonderful team of security guards for the community, and they're all volunteers. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward them. And by the way, just something I want to have to mention over here is that you guys have to understand, forget about Friday. Friday, we still have the police department at the beginning, the first line. But for Salat al-Maghrib, Salat al-Isha, when it's night and it's dark, we don't have the police department there. It's actually our own brothers who are standing there to guard the community. So they are the first line, subhanAllah, to face any threat that possibly can come to the community. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward them for their sacrifice. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward them immensely for the dedication and the devotion for the community. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keep them safe. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect them and protect their families, Ya Rabbil Alameen. Keep them always in your dua, because wallahi what they're doing is something, we only see it to be a big deal because, mashallah, they just direct traffic and so on. You never know when the real threat might come. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward them for all of that, Ya Rabbil Alameen. So the question that came from the sisters right now is, okay, we have a wonderful team of volunteers in the security team. can we have a female security guard, inshallah, during the women's section?
Inshallah, so we are working on that, inshallah. Like Fuad Bhai said, when we first started, we have only limited amount of volunteers. So now we are up to 16, and we are planning of expanding that team, and also possibly recruiting some of the sister and train them, inshallah. So that's coming, inshallah.
No. Jazakumullah khair. Any other questions, Jama? Yes, go ahead. No. So how do you deal with that? So the kids, when they come to the masjid and they exit, when their parents are not paying attention, how, as a security, deal with the situation?
So, so Ramadan is probably the month where we encounter this the most, and many of you have probably seen security officers detain some of our youth. It's a big safety concern because when you have kids who are 8, 9 years old, trying to go to the gas station, trying to go to CVS, cross the street at 9 p.m. at night, 10 p.m. at night, it is a challenge. It's something that our safety team has actually actively discussed, and we have a protocol for it as well. So in many of the instances, when we have kids that are trying to leave the premises without an adult, our first response is to send them back. But in many cases, we have actually asked them to stay with us, and then we actually call their parents, have their parents come and basically retrieve them. So that way we can inform the parents of the safety concern when their kids are trying to leave the premises at 9, 10, 11 o'clock at night.
Do you charge the parents any ransom for this?
We have not. It's not been a request yet from the masjid. Yeah.
Okay.
Hassan may approve it for this year.
Any other questions, Jama? Yes, go ahead. Mm-hmm. نعم. نعم. أكيد. جزاك الله خير. So the question is about training for first aid. Do we have that in the community? Because sometimes, we need that, subhanAllah. It might be not just a physical injury, anyway. Is there any training for this in the community?
Yeah, we did have training in the past where we did train a few of the community members for CPR. And I guess we do once a year. And then I guess we're going to do this year as well. So
usually, actually, I see that we do that before Ramadan. So we prepare a lot of the volunteers to have training for that, just in case something happens, because you know how it gets crowded over here. People, subhanAllah, sometimes they get, heat shock or anything like that. So we have some people who get regular training every year. And also with the youth program that we have, the YYP, actually, we have some of the volunteers there also had the training as well, too. So alhamdulillah, we do that every now and then. When we see there's a need for this, we invite those volunteers engaging in certain programs, and they do this kind of training, alhamdulillah, Rabbil Alameen. It's open for everybody. Open for everybody, yes. Both brothers and sisters now. Any other question? Yes? Assalamu alaikum.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. No. So the question is, can we do an actual drill, just in case something like this, may Allah protect the community from that. Is there any way we can make that training, anytime soon? And specifically, I think I would like to actually to emphasize the point on the very special day when everybody wants just to come for 20 minutes for Salatul Jumu'ah and leave. Can we do something like this? Is there any way we can work the logistics so we can make a training like this during Friday time as well? And from a fiqh perspective, I can tell you that if this is needed, we should do that. The Prophet ﷺ, he did an actual salah, to perform salah on the minbar, and he was moving up and down to display how to make the movement of salah, just to train the people how to make salah on Friday, on Salatul Jumu'ah. So if this is needed, I think we should do that, inshallah, tabaraka wa ta'ala. But once you work the logistics, let us know, inshallah.
Absolutely. First step will be getting the training for the community in the seminar, and then I think a drill is something we can probably work through.
Sure.
One more
So-
question, inshallah.
Just to add to that, we are trying to train all of security officer for those drills first before going into the community, because we don't want to cause any kind of, confusion. Also, change stuff at the last minute is going to be a bit confusing. So
No.
we're trying to get trained properly and then train the community that way.
Okay.
And in addition to that, really quickly, for all of the level 3 security officers, we are projecting to have a real lifetime simulation. So that software does is actually, it puts a security officer in front of the camera, and he or she will react based on the scenario. So that's coming, inshallah, soon too.
Just a reminder, inshallah, we're going to be praying Salatul Isha at 9:30 as we announced yesterday, just to let you know, inshallah. Yes. So until we have a female, inshallah, trained officer, can we have one of the volunteers to be there in that position from the brothers, inshallah?
Absolutely. So this past Friday, I'm not sure how many people noticed, but we had a security officer at that entrance, at the exits in the back, and here at the front. So what you'll see every Friday going forward is you will see uniformed security officers in addition to the Irving Police Department.
No. Mhm. Ad-du'a. The supplication, that's all. No.
Yeah. So we actually have. So we have actually discussed what to do in those type of scenarios. So if you notice on Friday, 2 security officers were actually right next to Sheikh Omar
No.
during prayer and after.
Uh,
Right. Well, so the security team doesn't have any jurisdiction outside of the masjid. So
So
unless
she's
you want to get an escort from Capel PD or
I'll
IPD.
hire you, inshallah. Okay. So basically, asking for guards, for the imams. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect our religious leadership and our imams, Ya Rabbil Alameen. Because again, they're also actually, like she said, a visible target for any kind of hate crime, really. Alhamdulillah, personally speaking, I've been living in this community for the past 9 years. I've never had any encounter, alhamdulillah, but positive, for Allah Azza wa Jal. And we do everything possible to make things, again, the whole purpose is really to humanize our community. I mean, we're human beings after all. And you keep reminding yourself and reminding everyone that you meet is that behind this image that you see, behind this hijab, behind this beard, there is a story, there is a family, there is a human being, there is really a human experience. You're a spouse of someone else, you're a child of somebody else, you are the sister and the brother of somebody else, so there is experience in there. And that's what we need to emphasize. People, they need to see beyond these labels, inshallah, as much as we can. So in the last 10 minutes, inshallah, I would like just to share with you a few words from a Muslim perspective, from a spiritual perspective. How should we, look at these kind of events and these circumstances? There's no doubt it's a tragic event, a tragic circumstance that could happen to any community, not just for the Muslim community. But how should we as Muslims look into these situations? The first thing I would remind myself all the time is what the Prophet ﷺ informed us in regards to how the time progresses towards the end of time. If you remember from the sessions we did before about the signs of the Day of Judgment, it seems that everything around us that is happening is bringing us closer to that, which means we see signs that has been predicted to us by the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and it's already there in the text that, you know what, when the time comes closer to end, you'll see things. And some of these things, the Prophet, peace be upon him, he said that قال ما من زمان يأتي إلا والذي بعده شر منه. There is no time that comes except that the time after is going to be worse. However, he said, there will always be ta'ifa. There will always be a group of people who always hold the truth, and these people are going to be, no matter how difficult circumstances are, they remain on the truth, which means stay with them. This is basically what he's guiding us to, the spotlight. So there is always this bright spots in the darkness of the night and the darkness of times. No matter how dark it gets, look for these bright spots. These bright spots can be found everywhere and anywhere. Just look for the people who are really sensible and reasonable, those who are truly looking for the best for everybody, and follow the trend of always being safe for them, inshallah ta'ala. The second thing I want to remind myself and everybody as well is that when things get difficult, we've been ordered and we've been asked to come closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not running away from Allah azza wa jalla. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, فَفِرُّوا إِلَى اللَّهِ. The word firru, which means run away back to Allah. I mean, even in English, if you're going to say run away, what is the preposition that you use after that? You say run away from. But here, Allah says run away to, which means run away back to Allah azza wa jalla, not running away from Allah subhanahu. Why? Because no matter how difficult things go into your life, you need to go back again to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to find shelter and find safety. The problem with this is that we're human beings, and we spoke about the sequence of events, psychological events happen in our minds when we go through calamities and difficulties. So the problem with that is that when the calamity befalls, when a crisis comes down, even no matter how knowledgeable you are, you become completely heedless of that knowledge. Like the fact and the truth becomes irrelevant. Why so? Because you're in distress right now, and the only thing that could help you go through these difficulties is the strength of your faith and the strength of your iman. Without the strength of faith, no matter how many presentations you've actually attended or books you've read, it's not going to help much if your iman and conviction are not strong enough to move you forward. And here, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَفِرُّوا إِلَى اللَّهِ, run back away to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Find your way back to Allah, not running away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Number 3, what do? I want to run away to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One thing Brother Uthman talked about is the dua, the supplication. You see, we don't say I only have supplication for you. It's not like you only have supplication. No, you have the most powerful tool, which is a hotline between you and your Creator subhanahu wa ta'ala. So in order for you to run away from when something happens, the first thing you need to look into is what? Establish that connection. Make that supplication. Make that dua. If you don't know much of these supplications, I suggest for each and every one of us over here to go and look into the books of supplications and find these dua lines that you can memorize and use them. Use them on a regular basis. Use them on a daily basis, so that not because you want to prepare for a disaster, no, because it always keeps you in connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So make sure that you have this connection on a regular basis and teach your children as well, inshallah azza wa jal. Next to this is we have to understand, no matter how difficult things happen, this is part of a divine plan. What does that mean? We do believe as Muslims in 6 articles of faith, and one of them is what we call al-qadar. Al-qadar, which means predestination. Like everything that happens by the will of Allah azza wa jal. Like nothing happens without His permission. It doesn't mean that He loves it or He likes it. No, it's just part of the test. Otherwise, if everything good is going to happen, what's the meaning of the test? So God allows things to happen. He allows things to happen, but He does not necessarily love everything. He asks you to do certain practices, which is considered the Sharia and the law and the commandments, to keep you safe and to keep you in the right direction. But people make their own choices and they step off that limit and commit these crimes and so on. So as a believer, anything that happens, there must be a wisdom behind it. I might not know it now, but I trust Allah's judgment in that regard. Shaykh Islam ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala said, "Ash-sharrul mahd adam." Absolute evil is inexistent. Doesn't exist. There is no such thing as absolute evil. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, وَعَسَىٰ أَن تَكْرَهُ شَيْئًا وَهُوَ خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ. Perhaps you might dislike something, but there is so much good in it. And you might like something, he says, that there will be so much evil that will come out of it. So Allah says, وَاللَّهُ يَعْلَمُ أَنْتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ, and Allah knows and you know not. So we need to keep that in our mind, that whatever happens, I might not know the wisdom behind it today, but maybe later. I don't know. You know what? regardless what's our point of view on the matter, but subhanAllah, it's a tragic event what happened in New Zealand, but look the outcome that came out of it. This person was trying to break the society down with his vicious attack and with his hate, but the outcome that came out of this is unbelievable. I wish that the American society, our community, reacted to these vicious attacks that happened here in the same fashion. It brought everybody together. And that's the meaning of being a community. So we don't know where the khair is, where the good is, just we need to have that kind of trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then, however, just because this is considered judgment from Allah and we have to accept His judgment, it doesn't mean we cannot defy the qadar, the predestination, with another predestination. What does that mean? Like if everything happens by the will of God, does it mean that I just have to surrender and submit and just like, all right, just have to accept it the way it is? Can I bring change? Can I fight that with the legal means and the proper means to remove this kind of injustice? Absolutely. You should look in every aspect of the predestination, the qadar, to remove that. Like Umar bin Khattab radiallahu anh, the Sahabi, the companion, when he wanted to visit a town in which there was a plague, and he was told, you shouldn't be going there, you might die, this and that. And he said, no, we stay away. So he was told, are you running away from Allah's qadar, Allah's judgment in this matter? He goes, yes, I do. I'm running away from Allah's judgment to another Allah's judgment, which means Allah's qadar of safety is also required for me to follow. Just like you want me to follow to submit to the plague and the sickness, if it's going to happen, I'm also required to look for safety as well. When it comes for us to make measurement and take precautions and also start taking steps to remove this injustice and so forth, we have to also be smart in the way we do that. So that's when we look what we call masalih and mafasid, which means we look for benefits and harms. Some people, subhanAllah, when the events in New Zealand were unfolding, I was on multiple groups on WhatsApp. Some of them are local from here, and others old friends from from Muslim countries. The reaction in both or these different groups is just unbelievable, completely different. Because people live in their own bubbles sometimes. They live their own echo chamber, so they speak in certain language and so forth, versus somebody who is here and living and seeing the goodness of the society and so forth. And you can tell that people cannot tell sometimes to choose between good or bad, or when it comes to two goods or two bads, two evils. So we have to make sure that whatever that we do, it's something for the benefit of all. And when we look to the benefit, we always look to the greater benefit. It might not be immediately today, but we have to put the seed there and let it grow. And just might reap the benefit out of this 20 years from now. We never know. We just need to do the right thing and the best thing for the community and for everybody as well. In addition to that, we have to keep looking for guidance through, of course, the text. This is the time when people should go back to the Quran and the tradition of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Read about the stories of the prophets before us. Prophet Abraham, Moses, Isa, all of them. Read their stories. The kind of difficulty they had to go through. Read about them. So we're not different from them. We're going through similar difficulties, but at different scales, obviously. So if we don't see these stories in the Quran, we would never believe that these things could happen to somebody before us. So when we learn that things like this could happen, and people, they learn to recalibrate and mobilize and then move on and move forward, we will just withdraw and just wait for the end. So it's always important that we look into the seerah and the history of the people before us, so we learn lessons. In addition to the seerah and the history we learn in the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet, also the history of our country here. We should really study the history of the country, not just in college, Jama'ah. Once you finish college, that's when you start learning the true history of our country. The different, group that came before us. The history of the civil rights movement, for example. Many of these things we need to learn, so we can learn, inshallah, the way to do things right, bidnillahi azza wa jalla. And finally, just want you to know that, when it comes to injustice, it doesn't last forever. These tyrants and these haters, they don't last forever. It's just an episode in this life. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it in the Quran clear. وَلَوْلَا دَفْعُ اللَّهِ النَّاسَ بَعْضَهُمْ بِبَعْضٍ. If it wasn't for Allah azza wa jalla pushing people against others, which means there will be time when good will become, very popular and prominent and the most, basically, the victorious in the time in the society. And there will be time when, unfortunately, when, the good people are not doing what they're supposed to do, others will take over. So it's kind of matter of battles. One time, there's one day here and one day there. So what we need to do, we always try to look for the bright spots in our society, adhere to that which is right, and making sure if the time is the tide with the good and goodness, we push it as far as we can in the society. And if it was the other way around, we do our best to persevere, to do our best to bring that which is best to the community until the time comes again for goodness to prosper and move forward, inshallah. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect our community, Ya Rabbil Alameen. May Allah Azza wa Jal keep our community and family safe, Ya Rabbil Alameen. We ask Allah subhanahu to keep our community all together in the Dallas area, protected, Ya Allah. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have mercy on those who lost their lives in New Zealand. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive their sins. May Allah Azza wa Jal raise their ranks in Jannatul Firdaus al-A'la. Give their families beautiful patience, Ya Rabbil Alameen. I know we said that we're going to have some time for questions, but the time is up actually, so we're going to have to call the adhan, inshallah Azza wa Jal. And if you guys have any more questions, I hope some of the panels will be around here, inshallah. So hopefully we can have a few more minutes for you. You can reach them out, inshallah, and talk to them and ask them your questions. Once again, jazakumullah khair for being here with us. A last announcement for me, inshallah, tomorrow, after Isha, we have a very special guest. Isha is going to be at 9 o'clock again, but we have a very special guest, Imam Asadullah Ugur from the Muslim Chinese minority, who's going to be here to speak to us, inshallah, about the situation of the Muslims in China. I invite you all to come, inshallah ta'ala, after Isha tomorrow at 9 o'clock. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.